The U-boat crisis reaches its peak early 1943. By March 1943, the Battle of the Atlantic appeared to be tilting dangerously in Germany's favor. German U-boats operating under the command of Grand Admiral Karl Donitz were achieving devastating results against Allied shipping. In that single month, U-boats sank more than 100 Allied vessels, sending shockwaves through London and Washington alike. To Allied leaders, the situation felt existential. If the Atlantic sea lanes collapsed, Britain, an island nation entirely dependent on imported food, fuel, and military supplies, would be slowly strangled into submission. For Prime Minister Winston Churchill, the Atlantic was not just another front, it was the foundation upon which every other Allied campaign depended. Without secure shipping routes, armies could not be supplied, aircraft could not be fueled, and invasion plans for Europe would remain nothing more than paper dreams. German submariners believed victory was within reach. From their perspective, Allied defenses appeared overstretched, technologically inconsistent, and strategically reactive. The U-boat fleet had grown dramatically since 1939, and Donitz believed that sheer numbers, combined with coordinated wolfpack tactics, could finally overwhelm Allied escorts. Yet, beneath the surface of these apparent German successes, the balance of power was already beginning to shift in subtle but decisive ways, changes that would soon turn hunters into hunted. German strategy and the illusion of dominance. From the beginning of World War II, Germany's naval strategy focused on a war of attrition known as the Tonnage War. Rather than confronting Allied navies head-on, Donitz aimed to sink merchant ships faster than the Allies could replace them. Early successes seemed to validate this approach. The summers of 1940 and 1942 became known among U-boat crews as the Happy Time and the Second Happy Time, periods when poorly protected convoys fell victim to aggressive submarine patrols, particularly off the American East Coast. When the United States entered the war, its initial lack of convoy discipline and coastal defenses created what German submariners cynically called American shooting season. However, this apparent dominance masked structural weaknesses. Germany relied heavily on radio communications to coordinate attacks, making U-boats increasingly vulnerable to detection. Meanwhile, the German Navy, officially known as the Kriegsmarine, lacked sufficient air support, a critical flaw in an era when aircraft were becoming decisive anti-submarine weapons. Although Donitz was promoted to overall naval commander in early 1943, his new authority could not compensate for industrial inferiority or technological surprise. The growing number of U-boats did not translate into proportional increases in effectiveness, especially as experienced commanders were lost and replaced by increasingly undertrained crews. What looked like strength was, in reality, an overstretched force nearing its breaking point. Allied weaknesses and the mid-Atlantic air gap. At the start of 1943, the Allies faced serious operational challenges. One of the most dangerous was the mid-Atlantic air gap, a vast stretch of ocean beyond the reach of land-based aircraft. This region, grimly nicknamed Torpedo Junction by sailors, allowed U-boats to attack convoys with relative impunity. Although the Royal Canadian Navy had expanded rapidly, escort ships alone were insufficient without aerial reconnaissance and attack capability. Compounding the problem, Allied resources were stretched thin by commitments in North Africa, including Operation Torch and the fighting in Tunisia. Escort vessels and fuel supplies were diverted away from Atlantic convoys, reducing their flexibility and endurance. Even worse, German naval intelligence had temporarily broken British naval codes, allowing U-boats to locate the majority of convoys with alarming accuracy. Sinkings surged again in early 1943, creating what many contemporaries described as a crisis. Yet this perception, powerful as it was, overstated the danger. Allied shipbuilding programs in the United States were producing merchant vessels at unprecedented rates, quietly offsetting losses. The real turning point was not panic, but coordination, something the Allies were about to achieve on a scale Germany could not match. Technology turns the tide. The dramatic reversal of fortunes in spring 1943 was driven by a convergence of Allied technological and tactical breakthroughs. While code-breaking, particularly the decryption of German Enigma signals, played an important role, it was only one piece of a larger system. New radar systems allowed ships and aircraft to detect surfaced U-boats at greater distances, while improved sonar, ASDIC enabled escorts to track submarines underwater with unprecedented accuracy. High-frequency direction finding, known as HFDF or HFDUF, proved especially lethal by locating U-boat radio transmissions in near real time. Armed with this information, Allied escorts could proactively hunt submarines rather than merely react to attacks. Equally important were new weapons such as the Hedgehog mortars, which allowed escorts to attack without losing sonar contact. These innovations transformed convoy defense into an integrated, layered system. Aircraft, especially long-range bombers and flying boats, closed the mid-Atlantic air gap, forcing U-boats to remain submerged and severely limiting their effectiveness. By April 1943, the balance had shifted. Allied losses fell, while U-boat casualties rose sharply. For the first time, German commanders realized that continuing operations in the Atlantic might be unsustainable. Black May and the collapse of the U-boat offensive, May 1943, marked the decisive collapse of the German submarine campaign, a period remembered by U-boat crews as Black May. During convoy battles, such as SC-130, Allied escorts demonstrated the full maturity of their new tactics. German wolfpacks were detected early, harassed relentlessly, and denied the ability to coordinate effective attacks. Aircraft forced submarines underwater, while surface escorts pursued them with deadly precision. In a single month, Germany lost over 40 U-boats, nearly a quarter of those operational. Among the dead was Donitz's own son, a personal tragedy that underscored the human cost of the campaign. Faced with catastrophic losses, Donitz ordered a withdrawal from the North Atlantic. This decision effectively conceded control of the sea lanes to the Allies. The U-boat threat, once seen as a war-winning weapon, had been neutralized. Germany's failure stemmed not only from Allied strength, but from German blind spots, poor intelligence, rigid command structures, and a lack of coordination with the Luftwaffe. Experience drained from the U-boat arm faster than it could be replaced, leaving inexperienced crews to face a technologically superior enemy. Strategic consequences and historical legacy. The defeat of the U-boats in 1943 reshaped the course of World War II. With the Atlantic secured, the Allies transformed the ocean into a logistical superhighway, enabling the buildup of forces in Britain and paving the way for the invasion of Normandy in 1944. Germany, once dominant at sea, was now on the defensive everywhere. 2 years later, as the Third Reich collapsed, Donitz briefly became Germany's head of state, following the suicides of Adolf Hitler and Joseph Goebbels during the final days of the Battle of Berlin. The Atlantic campaign stands as a powerful lesson in modern warfare. Numbers alone do not guarantee victory. Coordination, technology, intelligence, and industrial capacity ultimately decide outcomes. The story of how U-boats went from hunters to hunted in just 2 months remains one of the most dramatic reversals in military history. Reminder that even at the height of apparent success, strategic defeat can be just around the corner.